Yeah, lovely time. I'll move down one so you can not see Robert, you know Robin?
No, I don't know her. I've seen her on Facebook.
All right, well, g'day everybody. It's nice to see who's here already. My name's Theo, and I'm going to try and get the show rolling. We're actually starting at 6:30, but before we do that, we've just got a little bit of a special session by some of Dave's friends. They're going to actually play two songs from the book. One is Sorry, and the other one is Let Justice Roll. So whilst we're waiting for everyone to gather, please enjoy these songs.
Some of Dave's Friends is our official band name.
They give you street credit.
Right. You give us street credit. Yeah. I was told that we were the good guys a long time ago. I was told that we fought a good fight from go to woe. I was told that we wrote the guidelines to give a fair go. I was told that we'd always do right, friend and foe. Sorry, Aussies, I don't think that no more. Sorry, Aussies, I think we're against what we say we're for. I was told to sort out iniquity, let it go. I was told to strive for equality, young and old. Well, sorry, Marie, I don't think that no more. Sorry, Marie, I think we're against what we say we're for. I was told to vote for a Democrat to hit the road. And I was told to welcome the underdog, bring them home. Sorry, refugees, I don't think that no more. Sorry, refugees, I think we're against what we say we're for. I was told we protect the innocent a long time ago. I was told we care for civilians in events of war. Sorry, Rockies, I don't think that no more. Sorry, Rockies, I think we're against what we say we're for. I think we're against what we say we're for. Sorry, so sorry. Sorry, so sorry. Sorry, so sorry. system that keeps the poor apart. Let justice roll on like a river, like a river, and truth like a never failing, ever flowing stream. And tears of rage will turn to laughter, and people become what they should be. Oh, let justice roll on like a river, and truth like a never failing, ever flowing stream. Then tears of rage will turn to laughter, and people become what they should be. Oh, let justice roll on like a river, and truth like a never failing, ever flowing stream. Then tears of rage will turn to laughter, and people become what they should be.
I was a magician for a while. I've been both here and there. Yeah, well.
Good evening, everybody. What a wonderful way to start the evening. So my name is Fiona. I'd like to warmly welcome you all here. I know it's going to be a wonderful night as we celebrate the publication of Dave Andrews' new book, To Right Every Wrong. So before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Yagara and Turrbal, and pay all of our respects to elders past, present and emerging. This land has always been an area that people farmed, built villages, had extensive agricultural systems, but also gathered to tell stories and to sing songs. And we hope to continue a very long tradition. And because we also welcome our Zoom audience, which is why there's a laptop sitting there. So everybody say hello to the Zoomers. Hello, Zoomers. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on where our Zoomers are sitting and listening as well. So what do I have to do? Okay, feel free to engage in as much social media as you like. So we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook and Instagram. It's a way to let people know that Dave's book is here and ready to be launched into the world. Our toilets are behind the counter, up the stairs and to the end. Do use the one at the end. The other one makes a really loud noise and everybody will know that you've gone to the toilet. So I'll be handing my duties over to Theo, but at the end we'll be doing a signing. So the books will be for sale at the counter and we'll have Dave right at the front of the window and he'll be only too happy to sign books there. So now it's my great pleasure to welcome Theo.
G'day everybody again. A warm and kind greeting to you all. It's great to look out and see such an eclectic mix, a bit like a melting pot, and I love that. Yeah, we can celebrate our diversity and also celebrate our commonness. And probably a lot of our commonness is because of this big bloke down here, Dave. Yeah, so welcome. It's good to have you here. I also too would like to acknowledge our traditional owners, the custodians of this country. I know we stand here at great pain and great cost to you. All right, we've got a lot of things still that we've got to get right. Help us get there. Please be patient with us. But there's a lot of us that are trying. So I just want to say that. I'll just give you a rundown of the evening. We're going to be very fortunate to have our lovely band back up soon to do another song. And we've got 3 speakers who are doing roughly 10 minutes each. And they'll be sharing about Dave's book. And then what's really important, we want to allow some time for some questions from the floor to Dave. And then hopefully by 7:30 we've wrapped up. So we've got time for you to go and buy Dave's book, get a signature from him, and allow some time before the bookstore closes. So that's a bit of a rough rundown of this evening. So we'll keep it rolling. Could I get Steph, Peter, Andy and David back up again? They're going to sing the song, I Still Long for Love. And this is really, really pivotal in the book today. So yeah, thank you guys, and let's give them another warm welcome.
When we were young, once believed we'd see the kingdom come. Once believed that Christ would come and save everyone. Long ago, you and I were young.
When we were young, I once believed that we'd do what needs to be done. I once believed that all of us would right every wrong. Long ago, when you and I were young.
Those days are gone, but I still long for love to fill my soul. I still long for love to floods my soul, overflow like it did very long ago.
Those days are gone,
And I still long for love to fill my soul. I still long for love to flood my
soul to
overflow
like it did
very long.
Those days are gone.
I still long for love to
Flood my soul
I still long for love to flood my soul to overflow
like it did very long ago.
Thanks, guys, for doing a great job with that song. And thank you, Dave, for the song. Okay, hopefully everyone in Zoom land is going all right as well, early mornings or late nights or in the middle of the day. I'm going to introduce our speakers to you now. This will be the order in which they'll come up. So let me fire away. The first person we've got is Charles Ringmer. Charles is a sociologist, a missiologist, and an emeritus professor at Regent College, Vancouver. He's also a research professor at the Asian Theological Seminary in Manila and a resident in good old Brisbane. He's the author of 25 best-selling Christian books. And I was saying to Charles earlier, I'm a hospital chaplain and we use one of his early books still in our devotional, so it's fantastic. Yeah, there you go. Charles says he's a Franciscan tertiary, minus the sandals and the robe. He's a grassroots theologian who does not smoke grass. And he's also a long-time friend of Dave, which in itself is quite an achievement. The next person is Susan Pickering, who will come and speak. Susan is the minister at St Andrew's in a Uniting Church in the inner city of Brisbane. Susan says she is a woman, wife to Alan, mother to Abby and Molly, and G to Ryder, Bentley and Phoebe. She emigrated from Yorkshire in 1999 and loves it here. I know this, right? She's a vegan and she hates plastic. She recycles all she can and she even composts in a small unit block in the inner city. The kids refer to her as a big hippie and she thinks that's okay. She loves life and like all of us wants to see a world. So thanks, Sue, when you come on up. And last but not least, we've got Tim, who's come down from the sunny coast. He's somewhere out there. Oh, yeah, there you are, man, yeah. Don't recognise him with that haircut. Yeah. Tim lives on the sunny coast and he's a community planner on the Sunshine Coast Council. Tim says he's a husband, dad, a son, brother, nephew, friend, and proud product of Redcliffe on Gubby Gubby and Ninja country. Along with his beautiful wife and understanding teenagers, he endeavours to live authentically, playfully, and generously with those around him. He's been friends with Dave for about 10 years, and like many, he has shed many laughs and tears with Dave while exploring what it means to be a radical follower of Jesus. So thank you guys up front for your input, and we'll start off with Charles first. Thank you.
Just hoping for the last bit of the introduction, but anyway, that's what happens. And the launching of a ship is not unlike a book launch, except of course we won't be cracking a bottle of bubbly over this book cover. The launching of a ship involves christening the ship with its name, and then pronouncing a blessing. Some ships' names are really quite weird. For example, Barely Wake. But a blessing is more conventional, that God will keep safe all and everything the ship carries on the high seas. And we wish the same for this book by Dave Andrews. May it travel far and wide, and may it bring cargo to all of those who are with seeking hearts and minds and who are looking for love and peace and justice. So what I want to do is I want to conflate a book launch with a ship launch. I hope some of you brought your jackets because we may sink in the process. Now, at the outset, we need to stress that this book of Dave Andrews is no little coastal steamer. It's actually a huge container ship with 7 layers of containers on the top deck. What I want to do is I want to take you through these various layers on top of this huge container ship. The first layer is all the hard-won insights into the joys and challenges of cross-cultural living. And here, India in particular is important. The second layer has to do with all the lifelong lessons in serving the poor in both overseas and in local settings. And that's very, very significant. There are plenty of people who do their little thing overseas and then come back to the beautiful Brisbane or the lovely Queensland and somehow completely jettison in terms of what they were on about in the majority world country. What's important in this book is that there are lifelong lessons in serving the poor, both overseas and in local settings. The third layer of this massive boat has to do with the formative nature of creating communities of both hope and healing. Now, there's a fourth layer. This has something to do with, I believe, one of the major themes within this book. So hear me in terms of what I'm saying. The fourth layer has to do with the risk and the exhilaration of challenging institutions, churches, and the government regarding justice issues. Now, in this book, the major theme that comes across is Dave as a prophet. But there is hilarity in being a prophet. There's also fun in being a prophet. There's also mischief in being a prophet. And it's also deadly serious in seeking to be a prophet. And that's one of the things that will come across to you if you end up buying this book. And more importantly, that you end up reading it. The sixth layer has to do with strategies in community development for a hopeful future. And the seventh layer has to do with working hard in ecumenical cooperation and interfaith dialogue. So this book very clearly is a fully laden ship. And if you go down into the bowels of the ship, you'll find a lot more cargo. But what Dave has done is that he has given us some lenses through which to look at this cargo. So the first is an autobiographical lens. This book has to do with Dave's life and his ministry. So it's Dave's narrative. So if you want to know more about Dave Andrews, then very, very clearly, this is a book that you need to read. And of course, his parents have significantly snuck into the book. And a wonderful woman has also snuck into this book, his wife, Angie. If David would have included all the many, many fantastic people who have worked with him and alongside of him, this book would be about 400 pages. But thankfully, it's only 250, and that's a big enough read as it is. The second lens is psychological. Dave identifies himself as a number 8 on the Enneagram. This is a person who tends to dominate with an over and against energy in the cause of fairness and justice. Hence the title of the book, To Right Every Wrong. Maybe somewhat utopian, you may think, but Dave's passion nonetheless. The third lens is explanatory and typological. So Dave seeks to explain much of his life and ministry in terms of the prophetic impulse. And this actually is the heartbeat of this particular book. The fourth lens is Christological. Dave makes it very clear that he is totally enchanted with the Jesus of the Gospels. And if we were doing a book launch in the 1970s, we would say that Dave is the authentic Jesus freak. But he's somewhat moved on from the 1970s, thankfully, into slightly, just don't take too much notice of his hair and so on. But he has actually merged into the 21st century. And then Dave has a confessional lens. Dave admits that in being a person that he is, and being the person that he has done much good. He also acknowledges that he has hurt people along the way. And I believe that in this last point, in this confessional moment, I believe that David makes two very, very important points. On page 228, if you ever get to it, and I trust that you will, he says, I am becoming a caring prophet rather than simply being a confronting prophet. That's a good confession. Maybe Father Wally could give him absolution at this point, but this is a great aspiration that is very, very deep in terms of where David is at this point in his life. Then he makes a second really important statement. Throughout the book, he refers to Jesus as his relative, as his friend, as his teacher, as his example, and as his guru. But he says, I now may well need to see him as my Saviour as well. So you get Dave here at a very, very vulnerable level, which is not typical for prophets. So this is a book that demonstrates a conversional journey, and therefore is incredibly valuable and important. So what else is there to say? Except jump on board. This book is no Whitsunday holiday cruise. It is a heavily laden ship making its way through the South China Seas. Thank you.
I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land which we gather this evening as well, for their continued connection to the land, water and community. So I got an email, and attached to it was a copy of this new book asking me, would I be prepared to do a book review? And initially I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I've never done this. But then it's like, this is Dave. It's my honour. And so the fact that I'm stood here, obviously said yes. The book begins with the personal. And within the first few pages, I learned so much more about Dave, about Ange, about their lives together, how they met, the beginning of their journey together. You can't escape their love. But there's another striking characteristic that comes through really clearly, and that's their determination. And it's this love and determination that as you read through this book, you can see it clearly underpins all that they are and all that they do. Now, before you think this is some Mills and Boon, that is a thing, isn't it? People know Mills, yeah, okay. Before you think it's that kind of romance thing, it's not. And before you think I'm going to go into some, this is a romantic life of spirituality and faith, I'm not. Because for everybody gathered here, we all know how Dave rolls, and that's just not it. Oh, look at that, the fact that stopped my thing moving. Excuse me, technology. Okay, so this book, I see it as it's an invite. And before you know it, you are thrust into truth, and you're thrust into the world, the prophetic. And one thing I must do at this point is advise you that if you are easily offended by reality, by truth, if you want to remain in a bubble of being comfortable and unchallenged, please proceed with caution and allow for rest breaks throughout the reading. This book not only invites you on Dave and Angie's journey, but it invites you into their deep spirituality, their faith, and what the life of a prophet looks like. And when it's not explaining the prophetic, it actually is prophetic. Now, I read a lot, and sometimes, I find it hard, particularly if I've been sat reading for a sermon. But as soon as I started reading this book, it just drew me in. Not because I've known Dave for many years, but because its contents, the heartbeat of its contents, are challenging and inspirational. Dave, you share the highs and the lows. That allows us to hear and see your vulnerability. The passion for all that you do and all you are runs through this book. And Dave's passion is to live as Jesus lived and dare to speak truth. When I was reading this, I was thinking there are so many books filled with the right and the new buzzwords, books that sell a particular formula for success in mission and ministry, books that tell you how to plant and grow congregations, books that tell you how to share the love of Jesus, sharing the ways of how to get people to give their hearts to the Lord and leave many people feeling warm and fuzzy. This isn't one of those books. It certainly gives you a bit of a formula, but this is not your altar call, give your heart to Jesus and all will be well kind of book. This book's the real deal. This is a journey of life and service that is significant and grounded in deep faith and love. This is a clear reminder that this is about movement, about an alternative way in the world, about the kingdom of God. Justice, compassion, and empathy weaves through the chapters. Again, don't get comfortable. Dave doesn't let you off the hook that easily. He reminds us that Jesus was not pro-establishment, that the journey of a prophet includes grieving and repenting. It includes the need to enter into the pain and the suffering. It's a reminder that it's about entering into the spaces of muck, not simply singing around the manger. It reminds us that Jesus would stand with radical empathy against relentless cruelty for the sake of genuine inclusivity, equity, and equality. It reminds us that justice is not something we acquire, but something that we build. Now, at that point, you're not even very far in the book, so that's why you're going to need your rest breaks. In this book, Dave invites us on a journey, his journey, and the journey of Angie, through tough landscapes and into harsh spaces. Now, there is one point that I really do want to mention, and that is that moment in Paradoxical in New Delhi. And listen, folks, I've visited that area, and I can honestly say, even now, it is not for the faint-hearted. What does Angie do? She gets a room, and she prays with a person and with people with drug addiction. There's no escape from the reality that Dave and Angie are both committed, compassionate, and determined in their approach to the journey of faith, in their spirituality, in their ministry, mission, and service, and very much sit on the radical end of the spectrum. The book invites you on the journey to encounter the raw and the real, and how radical community, compassion, and hospitality brings about transformation. For many of us, at some stage, we are or we have been sold a Jesus, a faith that's safe and comfortable. Read this book, because you'll be quickly reminded that to follow the ways of Jesus, to live as people of the way, was never intended to be, nor ultimately should it ever be, safe. This book reveals situations that many of us will be and are grateful that we've not had to face. And yet, even in those moments, we see that there is no compromise in the way that Dave and Angie live their lives and committed to. Now, Jesus does get mentioned a lot, funny that. And the reality is that the passion throughout this book is drawn from the scriptures. But Dave also reminds us of the universality of God's love. Dave doesn't save his willingness to engage and build community with people of Christian faith. He engages and connects regardless of faith. Dave and Angie modeled the reality that radical community, hospitality, and love is about people, and very specifically, people on the edge, people who've been written off by others. This book calls us to remember that every single person we encounter is significant. It reminds us, and these are Dave's words out of his book, as I've used elsewhere, love the world as God does. And it reminds us that in doing so, we must also mourn over the state of it. This journey through personal, prophetic, and paradoxical takes us to the heart of living as Jesus calls us to live. In this book, Dave, you tell it as it is. You dare to speak truth. You continue to be a prophet, even though you're saying as an old guy, you continue to be a prophet. And I say, thank God. Thank God you continue to challenge the perception, the belief and understanding that this faith stuff is all warm and fuzzy. So I encourage you to read it. Read this book. Go on the journey of this radical hospitality, love and community. Because this book carries the sort of message that will touch the lives of those who may never step a foot inside a church, inside a mosque or any place of worship. This book will inspire you and also make you tremble at the thought of the life that we're called to live. So Dave, thank you for sharing your vulnerability, for not shying away from the call, because most would. This book will open your eyes and hearts, and you will be challenged. And I am just going to add at the end, there is a list of places you've preached, and St Andrews in the city is not on that, so I'd like to have a chat with you about that and add it to your list.
Always helpful following to other people that have got prepared notes. And so my mea culpa is that I've actually just left everything I was meant to bring at home. So it's too far to go to get it. So we'll see how we go. Dave's got a joke that he's fond of saying, and it's something along the lines of what's the difference between a radical and a conservative? And it's 20 years. And I think for me, as I've been reading the book, and this is really a story, it's the story of Dave, and the Dave that you know probably just as well as I do and better in many cases. But it's really this story of moving from this kind of radical, I'm gonna let people run roughshod over me, treat me with absolute contempt because I'm standing up for something that absolutely matters, to realising that there needs to be a more sustainable way to actually channel that passion, channel that energy, and channel that deep love and desire to see actually wrongs made right. And so in some ways, as I've read it, it's kind of like this little mirroring of my journey with Dave over the last 15 years. I don't even know I wrote in my thing for you, but I've known him a bit longer than that. And anyway, and my story with Dave is just one of openness. So I approached Dave many years ago, 15 or something years ago, and said, Dave, I've got to do community work, and I'm working for a church, and I don't have the clue what I'm supposed to do. Would you help me? And so Dave's immediate response was very simple. Yep, come and meet. We met at the Three Monkeys, and we just started coffee drinking, and we've actually continued that process over many years. It's reflected in the story. Dave doesn't just actually touch people in a shallow space where it just kind of goes, hi, how you going? He's not really the master of the light touch. This doesn't really happen. But when Dave actually engages, he engages. And so you're left with this undeniable sense that actually I am valued, I am meaningful. Who I am is actually important and considered and seen by this man every step of the way. That is my experience. As I read the book, you get to see, obviously, this significant idea of a prophetic heart, and actually a reluctance to that. It's not something that Dave necessarily aspired to. It's not something that he sees as this glory thing initially, but it was something that he's realised that he has to wrestle with and somehow settle into and explore deeply. Because again, he's not the master of the light touch and the flippant. And so in that place, you get to see Dave in all this, the thing that we often see in the public space, where he might be standing up against power, authority, institution, government, injustice, whatever it is, you see this force come out. But it's what we get to see beautifully in the vulnerability of his story is again and again is that he's got this lovely sounding board in Angie, just continually going, oi. And Dave going, and she reminds him of his greater heart, his sweetie. Hey, Dave. And it's this beautiful story when I read it of just Dave and Angie shaping Dave along the way, encouraging him to his greaterness. That actually he gets to a point as an older man where he actually goes, I want to be a caring prophet, not just a confrontational prophet. You get to see Dave in all the glory in terms of the book where he's vulnerable. He admits he's made some big boos. He's offended many. And there's been friendships and relationships fractured along the way. And I don't think that fills Dave with joy. But it's there. And he's encouraged me as I've grown up and as I've grown into my workspace, my vocational call, to be vulnerable, to be open and to be real. Dave actually taught me that it was okay, and he showed me and released me to actually cry when speaking in public, to cry when hosting funerals. When things matter, when things are important, you allow it to affect you. To right every wrong means to actually embrace, to actually feel it, to sit in it, to feel the hurt, the yuck, and yet to allow it to transform and translate into something that is positive, that is focused, that is liberating, that is gorgeous, that is beautiful, that is creative, that is wonderful. That is what it might mean to sit in the space and to consider to right every wrong.
You get to see in the book as you read and as you know, Dave, in the flesh, not just in the words, is that there's this courage that's just undeniable. The courage to live a radical generosity, a courage to live, to continually express and explore and wonder what it might look like to follow that Jesus way, is actually quite addictive when I read how Dave expresses that. And I know for me, early on when I was first allowing Dave to sort of shape me in my space, was that I used to want to be like Dave. You know, you'd harbour these exotic ambitions of just being this mighty person who'd stand up, and I was going to chain myself to a tank, and, you know, like I was going to do all this great stuff. But then I was realising actually that but I'm me. I'm not Dave. And the thing about Dave in his book, in Dave in the Flesh, when you talk, when you drink, when you eat with him, he doesn't want you to be him. He doesn't shape you and force you and say, hey, come and be like me. He actually just keeps going, who's this Jesus bloke? Who are you meant to be? Who's this character that you are? And what would it look like for you to pursue justice, to pursue peace, to engage love in action? It's a gift, Dave. And so this is really a legacy piece, you know. It's a legacy piece in words, it's in black and white. You've got a beautiful picture of Dave, so if you're on Zoom and you're not sure, there's a really lovely picture of Dave there. So even if you don't read it, put it in a frame and it'll but it's a legacy piece. And it's something that I'm really personally grateful for. I'm grateful because it's a chance that I'll actually get to see you be the man that's in you. And it's not performative. It's not just this made up thing that suggests this looks good on the outside. But there's just this depth and a guts and a reality to it that actually draws people in. And in that way, you're like Jesus that I choose to follow. There's something that's attracting to you. Sometimes I feel like I'm a moth to one of those blue lights and I get zapped when I get too close. But either way, I'm drawn into that space. So thank you for teaching me, inspiring me, challenging me. Thank you for being a caring prophet and for showing me and paving me a way that it might look like for me to follow this bloke that I choose to follow in Jesus. But equally what it might look like for me to lovingly create space that's hospitable and generous with my family. And that's happened in ways that I wouldn't have imagined. So thank you. Thank you for bearing it all. So I guess the end thought would be, is just buy the book. Just read it and then stop and just reflect. Don't just actually gloss over and go, what a miraculous life was Dave, but then reflect and go, what might it look like to embed and pursue justice and love and peace in a practice that is really deeply held, that is deeply kind, and that is deeply gentle, pursuing what is right. Then give it away and ask somebody else to do the same. Either that, I'll get them to buy it and fund Dave's retirement. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Tim, for your thoughts, your words, your reflections on this book. It's great. We're doing well with time. By the way, never buy a dark watch with dark handles on it or hands on it. Can't see. We're going well with time, which allows us the opportunity to ask Dave some questions. So, Dave, do you want to come on up? Would you want to do that? Yeah. Okay. And we will try and wrap up around 7:30, just to give everyone enough time to actually buy the book and for Dave to sign.
And also, we're taking questions via Zoom. So if everyone come in.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Fantastic. All right. Do you want to throw to that one first, whilst that gives everyone a bit of a chance to think?
Sure. Yeah, so the first question is from Mimi. Do prophets ever retire? And what do you see for yourself in the next 15 years?
This is from our dear friend Mimi from England. I don't think you ever retire from vocation. You may retire from a profession, but not a vocation. The challenge for me is to be transformed so that I become a much more gentle and gracious incarnation of that vocation. And fortunately, in my professional retirement, I get a chance to spend my time with Angie, who challenges me to do so. So that's what's happening now. Anybody else with a question? While you're thinking of something, I just want to say that I never intended to write this as a book. It was too embarrassing a subject. No one in their right mind would say out loud that they felt called to be a prophet. I mean, it just sounds so arrogant that when I started writing this manuscript, I wrote it under the working titles of Confessions of a Self-Righteous Bastard. And the last thing I really wanted to do by saying I had this call to prophetically engage the world was to be associated with those contemporary prophets who are like charismatic fortune tellers who predict the re-election of Trump and the rise of Christian nationalism. And I was very nervous about using the word prophet, lest I be associated with that crew who've been proved to be complete frauds. So I was very nervous about writing this book and about publishing this book. I was very scared about what people would say about it until the other day, I gave a copy of this book to my younger daughter, Navi. And I said, here you are, Navi, this is a copy of the book I've written. And she said, thanks, Dad, but I don't have to read it, do I? And then I realized I don't have much to be afraid of because not a lot of people will read it. So I anticipate a lot of flack. Is there a question that anybody would like? Oh, yeah, Mark, I think you're right.
By the way, Dave's not word prophet, it's not P-R-O-F-I-T.
Dave, you talk about your earlier life being more confrontative, aggressive, and hurt people and so forth, and you've made this journey to be a gentler person. Is there any sense, do you feel, that you needed to go through that phase to get to the second phase? Or if you had your time over, would you prefer to have been gentler from the start?
Yeah, it is a good question. I think I started out with a particular type of personality, which tended towards being more confrontational. So that was like a default setting that I started with. And it fitted really well with this kind of prophetic engagement with the world where I'm trying to publicly confront the painful contradictions in my society. And as I did that and reflected on that, I had to come to terms with the fact that the way that I was doing it was not always helpful, that sometimes it was completely counterproductive. And so I tried to stay true to myself as a person who was committed to a gospel of love and justice, but then embark on a journey of trying to find how I could live that out with greater integrity and congruence in a way that would actually be good news to people, not just bad news, good news to people. And so I don't know whether I had to do that or not, but that's where I started and that's what I had to work through.
Fiona's got another one from online. So
there's lots of thank yous from people on Zoom. Thank you for writing this book. And there's also a question from Greg. Given climate collapse, what would you say to the up and coming wannabe prophets in this time?
I think we've been blessed with young people who are prophetically engaging this issue. I've been so proud to see so many young people taking up this cause and advocating strongly. So I would say go for it and stay strong. Realise it's going to be a long, hard fight. Find a way of being able to heal your wounds so you don't become bitter in the process and reactive. Because I think when we are reactive, we actually destroy what we're trying to create. So find a way of nurturing your soul for the strength, for the struggle. Yeah, that's what it's doing.
First, I wanted to thank you who you are and your journey, your contribution for the community. That's important. I met you in '96. I have never, I have my respect and understanding about you and your journey always increased. I am a person with Indian background, a Hindu religion, all other things. And also we have a friend with the Muslim background. You are really strongly in the faith of follow Jesus Christ faith as well. But you still maintain your good friendship and understanding about various faith. What really made you to feel that? What is the key helped you to shape that life?
I think for me, Pelani, it was realizing that Jesus didn't call me to be a Christian over against other people who weren't. That Jesus never came to start a new religion, especially an imperial religion that was in competition with other religions. The more I got to know Jesus, the more I was convinced he called us to live life in all its fullness. And so whenever I'm engaging people of faith, of my own faith and other faiths, I look for what is life affirming in their tradition, and I affirm that. And so it's not because I don't believe in Jesus that I have my interfaith engagement. It's because I do believe in Jesus that I feel called to engage with people of all faiths and none in a way that affirms what is true and right and good and noble in their traditions. Because that's what I think Jesus is really committed to.
Hey Dave, I appreciate you, your book and your words and your wisdom and Angie about being on the long haul. I just wonder to know, how do you live as a prophet with being misunderstood? And how do you develop a thick skin, I suppose, to wash it off and take things personally? And obviously it's a sensitive person, as I know you. Because you're often misunderstood. And how do you live with that in the long haul?
Thanks for that question, David. So I believe we shouldn't develop a thick skin. I believe we're called to be vulnerable. And the great challenge for me has been to deal with the wounds that I've accrued along the way and to find a way of finding solace that is nurturing to heal those wounds so that I don't allow that wound to become poisoned with bitterness. I actually feel my greatest achievements in my life are ones that no one else has ever seen. And that is when I've been banned, blacklisted, booted out of different organisations, formally and officially excommunicated and put out in the street with my wife and my kids, with nowhere to go. That I have been able to find a way to relate to those people, to reach out to those people. And where those people down the track have asked me to come back and contribute to their groups and organisations, the very ones that sought to destroy me, I have heard myself saying on the phone, yes, I'd be happy to. And when I put the phone down, I've wept with the beauty of being able to have processed that pain in a way that is non-reactive, that's proactive. And I think anybody that's going to engage in the struggle for change around these issues that are highly contested. The challenge for us is to be able to recognize that when we choose to love, we choose a life that is a life of wounds. And we need to find a way of dealing with those wounds in a way where they're healed and we can respond in a healthy way to the very people who've imposed that pain on us. I think that's the heart, and that's where my spirituality is very important.
It kind of ties in with what you just said, Dave. It's a question from Gary. Is it not unavoidable that an authentic prophetic life will piss many people off?
Yes, and I piss a lot of people off, including some of the people in this room. So if there are people here who I've inadvertently hurt and we need to have some conversation about that, please line up afterwards. With the book, yeah. I'm happy to make an appointment, have a conversation about it.
A couple more up the back, anywhere? Get that one?
While we're waiting, let me just say that for me, this book is hopefully a funny, sad, but brutally honest retrospective, reflecting on what it's meant for me and my family to try to live a lifetime that's been committed to love and justice. As I've written this book, it kind of unfolded in three parts that have been referred to already by the reviewers, the personal, the prophetic, and the paradoxical. The personal explores the experience of spirituality that I share with Angie, that is a radical spirituality of compassion. The prophetical is the part where I embrace a prophetic call that I try to express in four roles. The role of interrogator, protester, practitioner, and inspirator. And the third part is the paradoxical, where I begin to recognize that while I have accepted the confrontational roles associated with a prophetic vocation, that I've needed to actually change those and allow myself to be transformed by grace so that I could move from a more confrontational role to a more caring role in my life.
Okay, thanks, Dave. We might actually make most of the opportunity of you being inside signing books and that. So I just want to say thank you everyone for being
Can I just
here.
say one more thing before you? Absolutely. What I want to say is this, the word autobiographical has been used in relation to this book. And I just want to say, like Charles says, that a lot of the material in this book is autobiographical, but it's not an autobiography. It's too partial, it's too incomplete. I just select stories that illustrate points I'm trying to make about my experiments with prophetic engagement in the world. That being so, I need to ask forgiveness of so many beloved relatives and friends who've played an important part in my life, who never get a mention in this book, but they would deserve in a proper autobiography. I don't want people to come to this as an autobiography and then find out I've left so many people who are important in my life. It's not an autobiography. It's a retrospective on that prophetic engagement. Having said that, there's one person that is certainly not left out of this book. There's one person mentioned in this book from beginning to end, who is central to this quest for our family to live a life genuinely dedicated to a gospel of love and justice, who stands like the Spartan she is through all the travail we've embraced and the trauma that we have endured. And that's my dear wife, Angie, who has always encouraged me to be better than I'd otherwise like to be. And this book is a testament to her witness to me, and hence the book is dedicated to her. Thank you.
Thank you all so very, very much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for our three speakers. And thank you to Theo for hosting us. And also thank you to those wonderful musicians. A round of applause for everybody. At the counter, like I said, we'll pop him in the window. True avid reading tradition of signing in the window. Thank you to everybody on Zoom for joining us. If you'd like a personally dedicated a copy of the book, give us a ring on 07 3846 3422 or email the shop as well. And thank you for the Zoomers for joining us as well. Final round of applause today. Oh my gosh.